Why is it that in midlife we feel energetically depleted? And how can we reclaim some of that vitality? That's my topic today. I hope you'll like this and go ahead and subscribe as well. Feel free to share. One of the conversations that rarely happens about the midlife journey is this thing about the decline, the drop of energy that we men experience. Why is it that so many men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s feel so depleted, more depleted than ever before in other stages of their life? Well, I want to break that down. And it's not just about explaining it, but it's about giving you a different perspective about what's really happening, empowering you with some solutions as well, so that maybe if you are feeling depleted, you can apply them. As someone who's spent over 30 years immersed in yoga, breath work, meditation, I see energy, this thing that we call prana, as the fuel of our lives. And we have control over it, regardless of the stage that we're in. We just need to have those tools and that awareness of how to work with it, how to manipulate it, how to grow it. And in midlife, we end up this thing here as a leaky vessel. So we leak energy. We have blocks in our energy flow. The disconnections that we're experiencing on so many levels impact all of this stuff. So we're going to explore those. And the good news is you do have the power to change all of it. I want to start with the physiological changes that we go through. And these are going to be the more obvious ones, right? Men go through hormonal shifts just like women. We hear a lot about menopausal issues with women, less so about what's going on with men. Yeah, you see some ads on TV for testosterone boosters and such, but we don't really talk about it so much. There's far less awareness and certainly less support. So testosterone does begin to decline in our 30s, and it continues to drop by, they say, about 1% per year after your mid-30s. So there's a decrease of some 15% by the time we hit 50. This impacts our mood, this impacts our stamina, our motivation, it even impacts our sleep, and here's one that we all know about, it impacts our libido. So you might not feel like yourself anymore, and that's that icky feeling that we get to experience. And when that happens, we kind of have our identity shaken. So what are we going to do here? We want to address the sleep disruptions. We want to address weight gain. We want to look at the loss of muscle mass that hits us hard at this stage of life. You know, in 2022, a study was done by the Endocrine Society, and it did confirm that lower testosterone is strongly linked to fatigue, depression, and that lower drive in midlife. And sadly, in midlife, this is the time where depression rates are the highest for men and suicide as well. Yeah, it's harsh. So what are some of the solutions? Well, I want you to consider prioritizing movement. You know, this can be a time where we become more sedentary, either by choice or by sort of default. Why do that? Let's look at more movement every day. Walking is the big thing. It's recommended that you walk up to an hour a day. That's one of the best health modifiers, renewers, fixers that's out there. I'd like to see you stretching some more too. Being a yoga person, that's what I'm all about. Stretching and opening up the body. When we stretch and open up the body, we stretch and open up the mind. They're related. And you can also do lifting. I'm an advocate of going to the gym. I love the grounding quality of working with weights. That working with the weights is also really good for bone density, as we talk about as aging, that we want to be working with resistance. So using the body's weight, using weights at the gym, the body needs activation. It does, even as we're moving through midlife into the next stage. The yoga thing is, like I said, what I advocate. It offers strength, it offers flexibility. And I would say the most beautiful thing about it is it offers a reconnection to your body. yoga was the journey for me that really helped me to learn to love my body back in my 30s when I started doing it. And now at this stage at 59, I totally love my body. Do I wish I had a few less inches around my waist? Of course I do. And I'll work with that. I'll do what I need to do to navigate that bit of it. But having that agility, that flexibility, having that energy and stamina, having sexual drive, all of that's really important for a balanced life. I'd also like you, with regard to testosterone, to consider looking at boosters that are more natural. Zinc, ashwagandha, which is an Ayurvedic thing, and I'm very much into Ayurveda, sister science to yoga. Ashwagandha helps to boost that energy that's around sexual urge. It also helps to balance out energy in terms of sleeping, which sounds amazingly contradictory, but it's very helpful. And there's Kangat Ali and other things. So find some of those natural boosters, give them a test, see how they work for you before jumping into the prescriptions. Because as soon as we get into prescriptions and having injections of testosterone, for example, the body's going to shut down the making of it. And we don't want that. Also, what I'm an advocate for at this stage of life is pelvic floor work. Yeah, so we can support our sexual health, our sexual vitality, our urogenital health, prostate stuff, right? By doing pelvic floor work. That's something I can help you out with in the future. Maybe that will be a future video. So that's on the physiological level. Let's transition a little bit, move a little bit into mental and emotional stuff. Burnout. So years of the grind, years of performing, years of providing for your family and others, it takes its toll. And what ends up happening is many of us normalize this kind of chronic stress that we're operating under. And it will lead to burnout. You know, one of the clients I'm working with right now, peak of his game, and then it just hit hard, burnout, and he's, been off work for a year. We don't need that to happen, right? We need to be working and being more self-aware so that we don't get to that point where normalizing the grind ends up having us, shutting down. Worse, most of us were never taught how to feel and process our emotions. So they get buried inside of us. And emotions are just energy. This whole thing is just energy, right? And it gets depleted. Like I said, it gets leaked out of us. So when emotions get stuck in there, that's another one of those ways that we're depleting our energy. So we need to figure out not burying resentment, grief, and anger inside of us, which will completely deplete our energy day by day by day, but learning how to identify those emotions and then to process them. Eventually, when they're stuck inside of us, we end up in this kind of numbing fog. And I speak to enough of you to hear this time and time again, where we can get to that point of, what's the point of all this? The fire is gone. It's out. We're dim. So what are some solutions here? Well, I really want you to consider, how can you build more awareness, emotional awareness for sure. This can be about having conversations with friends, having conversations with other men, journaling about your experiencing, doing some reflecting. And a good way to do that, frankly, is go out by yourself in nature, have a walk, feel yourself being held by nature, and just start to reflect and allow yourself to go into whatever comes up. Don't let it push away. And also get support. So men's groups, coaching, hello. There are ways that you can find support out there to move yourself forward. Again, coming back to the yoga world, breath work. Breath work is a game changer. So you can work with breath for 3, 5, 10 minutes a day. And trust me, it will change your mental state. The breath is a direct reflection always of the state of your mind. You can't flick a switch or turn a dial to change how your mind is operating, thinking, doing. You can, however, change your breath. Your next breath can change. And when you know how to use the breath to affect what's going on in the mind, That's a game changer. That will change. That's a gift for the rest of your life. We also want to reconnect to curiosity, have that sort of idea of inquiry, of just being open to explore, reading more, connecting more, finding some of those YouTube channels where they blow your mind with content, learn how to shift into new ways of being, join a class, an activity where you're engaging and working with others. The point being to keep learning. That's going to keep you young. That's going to keep you vital. And I really implore you to remember that unprocessed emotions become energy that's locked and unexpressed. Those emotions get tied up inside of you, locked inside of you. And that's why we see disease and various health challenges, because a lot of that inner stuff is contaminated by these pollutants of unresolved stuff. Let's look a little bit at lifestyle. So what are the choices that we make or are making? Maybe we're making those again by default. As men of this certain age and midlife, we can often respond to our lives in, I would say, two ways. We can give in and sort of go down the decline path, doing less and disappearing behind the remote control. That's one end of the spectrum. Or we can choose to, I'm going to push hard. I'm going to go and do the triathlon. I'm going to do all of this stuff, and trying to recapture that youth maybe, and denying some of the changes that are actually afoot and maybe how to address them somewhat differently. So two kind of polar ends of the spectrum, right? Maybe it's something in the middle. Maybe there's a moderate way that will be more balanced. I would say that doing nothing and pushing yourself really hard to feel young and thriving and vibrant again, neither of them is going to work long term. So what do? I'm going to suggest that you take time for a little bit of a midlife audit. Well, what does that mean? Well, like I was saying earlier about reflection, make this a little bit more structured though. Sit down, give yourself some time, block an hour, whatever the case may be. Get away from all the distractions, get out of the family home. If there's kids and dogs or whatever, I want you to be really focused about this and ask, what needs adjusting? What can I let go of? What am I open to exploring and doing differently? Take some time and be honest with yourself. Reflect on the career, reflect on the relationship, reflect on your overall state of being. Do that audit. It's important. And maybe you create a column for current, and then you create another column for what you'd like to see happening, what some of the options might look like. I'd also like you to try new practices. So there's beautiful mind-body connections you can experience through Tai Chi, through Qigong. Yoga has already been mentioned. Any kind of breath-led fitness, even walking, as we said, and you can do walking in a really creative way to engage a little bit more of the breath link to it. And I can share some of that with you as well. I think it's really important to also, in this area of lifestyle, look at rebuilding community, because what happens a lot of times is we start this path of disconnection where we're doing less. We're not engaging as much with friends as we used to, neighbors even, and even maybe extended family, and even maybe your immediate family. So how do you rebuild community? Maybe you could host game nights. Maybe you could plan some outdoor adventures. This can be something that you put in that audit of what you would like to do differently, and really be concrete about it. And if there's nothing out there that appeals to you, why not start your own group? There's this whole online thing that you can do, that creating groups isn't all that difficult, or maybe you do it in your community. Lots of opportunities. I'd also like to address this idea of unprocessed life transitions. We're going through a lot in midlife. It's so full of transitions. There's the career shifting, there's the relationship changes, there's the parent evolution, there's the aging parents. Oh my gosh. Men often can feel a lot of regret at this time. They can feel disillusionment. They can feel an envy or a resentment towards younger colleagues who come into the workplace and are rising up as stars, and maybe people in your demographic are sort of the ones who are fading. When work defines us so significantly as men, and that reality is changing, it can be a hard one. It can be like a kick in the nuts, as not to be too graphic, right? And the work may no longer bring the joy that it once did. In all of this, you can start to feel kind of lost. Primary relationships too, they can start to feel flat. You get into patterns, just like in your daily life. Our lives do become a lot of very much going through routine, almost living in autopilot, which sounds so harsh when I say that, but it really is true. So we get stuck in these routines in our relationships, and maybe they need fresh connections. Maybe they need some clear, honest, frank, vulnerable conversations, not just the usual patterns that you've gotten into over the years. So what are some solutions? Let's get real about what the emotions are and seek support for those. So what are you feeling in all of this? Connect to that. Understand those feelings. There's a whole range of feelings that we as men don't necessarily tap into. But when we can identify them, then we can begin to process them and work through them. Again, consider joining men's groups or different programs, coaching programs, one-on-one coaching. You need to potentially find safe spaces where you can have this sort of honest exchange and be encouraged to share and to connect and to process. And with respect to those primary relationship challenges, I want you to go into that work very consciously. We can come into some of those discussions very much in saboteur mode, where we're looking at all the negative and maybe being very judgy about ourselves, the relationship, the partner. Come into those conversations more consciously. Be open to listening and hearing. Notice when you're feeling triggered or defensive. Allow for more talking. Allow space to assume less. Assumptions, make an ass out of us, as they say, right? And you don't want that when you've been in a relationship for years or decades. You want to be able to reconnect, to touch base emotionally again. There's a lot of that emotional connection that really needs to happen. The reality is that separation may become necessary, but you want to do that from a place of clarity, from a place of dignity, not from a place of judgment, anger, and certainly you don't want to have regrets about it. I'm not advocating that this is a time to end relationships. I like to see them healed. But the reality is sometimes the patterns that have been developed for years or even decades, it's not so easy to recover from those. But you get to figure that out and do it together. Do it consciously. Do it like emotionally intelligent humans. There's a loss of meaning that occurs at this time. To me, that's about a spiritual disconnection. Without realizing it, we often wake up and see that the life that's been built around status, it's been built around roles, it's been built around productivity, it suddenly rings hollow. It doesn't feel fulfilling at all. And then the question becomes, well, what now? And often there's not a clear answer. There's a void, and that void can take you spiraling into depression. It can take you into some substance reliance. And that can look like alcohol, other forms of numbing agents, overuse of pornography, or it can just be a simple but challenging, quiet despair. So what are we going to do about that? I want you to start by asking yourself, what do I value now? This value check-in at this stage is important because what we valued in our 20s and 30s that got us on that trajectory to the career, the earnings, the developing the family, the home, all that stuff, your values aren't the same now. They are definitely different. So what matters most to you today, not what mattered most to you 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Do that exercise too, because it matters. Reconnect to some kind of spiritual dimension of life. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily going to church, especially if you're not a religious person, but you can explore practices, you can explore teachers and communities that support growth and reflection. One of the things that blew me away after having a couple of decades of a deep spiritual practice is coming into the personal development world and the coaching world and recognizing, oh my God, they use the same concepts. They just don't have it all in that flowery kind of spiritual language. So there are beautiful advocates out there. There are coaches who can provide you with input. There's just so many resources available to you now that you can find that deeper connection. You can find what most resonates with you. Consider this your midlife initiation, like that you're discovering yourself anew. Sometimes it's talked about as the second hero's journey, right? Coming through that portal of self-discovery again and all of the angst and the fear that creates. But guess what? When you do that work and you get to the other side, wow. Your midlife can be a sacred calling to evolve into a new and so much better version of yourself. That's my wish for you. That's the journey that I'm on, loving this part of my life. I'm not anywhere near where I envision myself being, but the trajectory and the movement and just the journey of getting there is so rewarding and so fulfilling. And I know yours will be as well. Align your daily life with your deeper self. And if you don't know who your deeper self is, that's the work you need to do. And that's actually an area where I have a lot of expertise. I also want you to think about social disconnection. I mentioned this previously, but we tend to have fewer, closer friends in midlife, and statistically this bears out. Years of the career focus, years of the family focus means we sometimes feel kind of disconnected emotionally and disconnected from actually doing things. So without a safe place to share what's going on, we can feel really alone. And this loneliness, it isn't just kind of a sad thing. This is one of your major energy drains. This is one of the big depleters. So let's explore that. Can you potentially reignite some friendships that maybe have gone by the wayside? And maybe they serve their purposes and that's okay. But how can you engage in finding new community, finding some new connections? How can you put yourself out there and start to have some honest conversations and invitations with others to have these conversations? Maybe you join or start a group, like I was saying earlier. And there can be different ways of looking at this. It might be, I live in this most beautiful place on Vancouver Island in Victoria. There's tons of hiking groups, for example. Maybe there's some kind of spiritual discussion group that you can get involved in. Maybe, and it can be with men of your own demographic who are looking and exploring all of these ideas, right? I run a men's community group where you can plug in and just show up and we can talk about whatever's going on. That's like a coaching circle, right? There may be book clubs that you could plug into. Really, it's anything that starts to feed a sense of connection. So important. You don't need to have like thousands of friends. You just need those few solid ones that you know are there, that have your back, and you have their back as well. Connection restores energy. Isolation depletes it. Plain and simple. So midlife depletion, I would say, is not about aging. It's about choices you're making. And some of that is around the accumulated disconnection. And that disconnections with self, that disconnections with your immediate family, your surroundings, that disconnections broader with friends and the community. It's a disconnection from your body, your emotions, your purpose, your spirit, and from people. It doesn't have to be that way. The truth is, we're not broken. I want you to think about this is a great opportunity to wake up. This is a great time to wake up. This is a great time to step into who that new you is. And if you accept that invitation into stepping into the new you, the second half of your life, I promise you, will be the most energized, connected, and meaningful chapter yet. Why shouldn't it be? If you're interested in this, and you want to talk more, just reach out to me. The information's below. I hope you have an amazing day. Talk soon.